Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Business of Learning podcast. My guest today is Stacy Richter, who is the CEO at Lingua. Stacy, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Joel. I'm super excited to be here with you as well.
Awesome. Well, tell everybody a little bit more about Lingua, what you guys are all about, and who exactly you guys help.
So Live Lingua is a language school where we teach people, basically purpose-driven, outcome-oriented learners how to speak a second language. It isn't any complicated than that. Our service, though, is all through live tutors. And what we've done is we've been able to emulate a full immersion experience online. So you can imagine the best way to learn a second language is to pick up and move to a country where they speak that language. That's not possible for most people. But the second best way to learn a second language is to do an immersion experience online. So you can imagine trying to learn a second language with a native language speaker from the comfort of your desk in your own home. So that's what we do. And we work with students who want to learn Spanish, English, German, French, Japanese, and Portuguese, to name a few.
Yeah, and what was the origin story of, because it's so interesting to me that there is a million language apps, language platforms to learn out there. What was the origin story of wanting it to kind of have that immersion into that, speaking with someone like from the comfort of your own home while they are in their own country, which is an interesting dynamic.
It is fascinating. So Live Lingua got started. I'll talk about our co-founders for a moment, Ray and Laura Blakeney. And 14 plus years ago, they actually met in the Peace Corps. And Laura was actually Ray's Spanish teacher in the Peace Corps. So they met, fall in love, and he learned Spanish from her. And then, of course, they were a couple, and they started actually a bricks and mortar language school in Mexico. Wow. And what they found was, as their school was thriving, they decided, what if we could do this online, right? They couldn't be with their students 24/7. So what if they could deliver classes to somebody who couldn't show up at their school? So they actually started doing lessons over Skype, believe it or not. This is long before Zoom, long before Google Meet, all these platforms we enjoy today. And what they found was, over a brief period of time, that actually the online lessons were outstripping their bricks and mortar lessons. So they had more people going online than they did coming into their school. Even people who could access the school and go in chose to start taking lessons online. So of course, Ray's a entrepreneur at heart, and so is Laura. And they said, well, hey, listen, this is where things are going. Let's do this. Decided to sell their bricks and mortar and went exclusively online. And that's when Live Lingua was born. And this was about 8 or 9 years ago. So in a lot of ways, they are actually pioneers in the online language space. Although it doesn't feel like that today, because there's so much on YouTube and all the mobile apps that we can use today. We kind of take a lot of that for granted, but it wasn't always like that. So the preface, though, was, how do you simulate the in-school and immersion style of learning? Because we all know, again, as I mentioned, the best way to learn a language is pick yourself up and drop yourself in the middle of the language speaking culture. That's just not possible online. So Laura had developed a program for our Spanish-speaking students called the CORE program, which is still in place today. And it's what we base all of our lessons on. And it simulates the immersion environment where our teachers, one, they're all native speakers of the language they're teaching. But the second level of that is that they're all professional teachers. And what I mean by that is, a lot, if not all of our teachers, at least have undergraduate degrees in education. Many of them have graduate degrees in education, or at the very least, they've got commensurate experience, anywhere between 2 and 10 years of teaching experience. And not just teaching in general, but teaching a second language. So we get both sides of learning a second language. And that's how we're able to teach somebody to speak a second language, probably 3 to 5 times faster than they could either reading books or even participating on many of the popular apps we talk about.
Yeah, that's interesting. And when it comes to, I think, language, we actually had a conversation before this, and I've mentioned how languages are something that's so, like, the more you have, the better, right? And I consider 3 that I can speak, and I want to add to that, right? So it's a very interesting thing to me. And what makes it so special, or even people that come onto the platform, what do they say about the difference between what they've tried before and how this is different, and the changes that they see in being able to learn a language faster, or anything else that they comment about the program? And I'll actually preface it with something else. what are some of the mistakes that they make before getting your help, and what do they see like this is the real difference maker into being able to learn this language faster or a new language faster?
I'm excited because this is what I live for every day. And I get direct feedback from our students when we welcome them on. And one of the stories that I get, Joel, is they have gone through and gone on 400, 700-day streaks. And then they go visit a Latin American country if they're learning Spanish. And then they realize they don't actually know how to speak Spanish. What they've learned, right, through the games and the way they play the language learning apps, and I won't name them all, but the way they've learned Spanish is they've learned some vocabulary, gotten maybe a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of false confidence. But when we're engaging on an app or even a digital course where there is a teacher, but it's not a
Mm-hmm.
conversation, it's broadcast, is you don't quite get the listening and the response. Because language
Mm-hmm.
is more about culture and understanding an individual. And how do we make that connection? Because if it was just a transaction, Joel, we wouldn't need to learn a language at all. That we'd be knee deep in all the interpreters out there. We
Mm-hmm.
would use all of the translation apps, and there is a purpose for that. But if we're looking
Mm-hmm.
to make a legitimate, real connection with an individual,
Hmm.
speaking the same language is a big part of that. And one of the examples, I mean, I have my own personal examples of this. I was literally probably about 3 or 4 months ago out for a walk with my uncle, and we're in this
Mm-hmm.
park. It's beautiful fall here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and there was a food truck and they served cappuccinos and all that stuff. But I noticed on their menu board they had empanadas and a whole bunch of other Latin American foods. So it was
Yeah.
just right. It was clear where they were from. Maybe not the country, but I knew they were from
Yeah.
Latin America somewhere. So I go up and I ordering in Spanish, and just to see their face light up that they're in a foreign country to them, and to see have somebody speak to them in their native language, man,
Yeah.
their face just literally lit up. And we
Mm-hmm.
have those we get those experiences all the time. That's my clue that language isn't just about saying some words and having the right
Mm-hmm.
grammar to, be able to order a coffee. It is about making a connection with the individual.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. You mentioned what are mistakes people are making
Yeah.
is they wait too long, right? I saw
Mm-hmm.
a post earlier today. Somebody was on a 700-day streak in one of their favorite apps. And that's commendable to have that level of discipline and commitment. But the story they left along with this post to celebrate their success was, yeah, I went to Colombia and I just realized I couldn't speak the way I wanted to speak. And I was
Mm-hmm.
fumbling because the native speakers I was talking to in Bogota, they speak too fast, right? A lot faster than what I
Mm-hmm.
was learning on an app. They were using
Yeah.
certain words I didn't know or in
Yeah.
the
Slang
context I
specifically as
didn't
well.
understand, right? That's the culture piece.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was this individual has waited 700 days to find that out versus
Mm-hmm.
jumping online with a live tutor or even in a group community where you can speak with native Spanish speakers and hear the difference. They just
Mm-hmm.
waited a little too long. Now, I'm glad they found us and are able to take their Spanish journey to the next level and learn from a native Spanish speaker and still use all the tools they've been using as supplements. That's probably the biggest mistake is people wait way too long.
That's so interesting because I've yet to hear that perspective. Most of the time, it's usually I think the main thing, which is hey, if you don't throw yourself in there,
Yeah.
it's really going to be tough to be able
Mhm.
to acquire that skill.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I think it comes down to a skill. I think you said before we were speaking, when you learn one, like the other ones that are like, for example,
Yeah.
Latin languages, they're all kind of be kind of similar.
Yeah.
So it's just more of a build that first skill and then just build on top of that even more. And talk to me a little bit about the challenges of having a language company with so many others out there. Obviously, there's the big ones that most people have apps
Yeah.
on their phones and other things like that. So, what are some of the challenges in being able to grow a company that is a little bit different than most, but also is still in the sea of all these other language apps and
Yeah.
organizations?
You know what? You use the right word, the sea or the ocean, right? Is
Yeah.
how do we get out of the sea of sameness and into the lake of differentiation?
Mm-hmm.
So if I take off my educator hat, put my business entrepreneur hat on, is how do we reach the right person at the right
Mm-hmm.
time with the right message and the right offer? That's the key. And now that there's so much more noise out there, it's the net we have to cast needs to be
Mm-hmm.
either massively big, which is where all these venture companies are coming in, and that's what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing, or it has to be just a hand thrown net saying, this is the pool I'm fishing in today, because we're looking for people looking for us. That's the key.
Mm.
The language space is growing overall, right? If we're doing all the Google search trends and all the money being spent on language services, that's growing.
Mm-hmm.
It's growing quite a bit. What is changing for us as a language school, particularly live tutoring compared to evergreen or the app-based learning,
Yeah.
is people are starting to find where in the continuum they want to be. Right. There's
Mm.
always going to be students who will do nothing but the mobile apps because they enjoy the gamification, it's entertaining, it's fun, and they can tell their friends that they're learning a second language and they can
Yeah.
feel good about that. And probably have no desire to go out and use the language in a Latin American country, French country, or wherever it
Mm-hmm.
happens to be. But then there's a continuum of students that do want to learn the language, but this
Mm-hmm.
is where they get started, right? To learn a little bit of vocabulary, get a little bit more comfort, and then they graduate up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before all of this entire mobile movement in the language space, there were students who would buy tutoring who weren't ready for tutoring hours. They wouldn't get the
Mm.
value out of it because they weren't ready to become uncomfortable with learning the language. And
Mm. It's a big
unfortunately,
step.
for those students, they probably waste a lot of money to find that out buying live tutoring. So where we start
Mm-hmm.
to find the business of learning and the business of language learning specifically is we're getting more purpose-driven, outcome-oriented students who have either tried the apps and have progressed to a certain level and now they want to make the jump,
Mm.
or they know the apps and all the different tools that are available for them to teach themselves aren't going to get them to the next school, right?
Mm.
Students who want to learn Spanish advanced placement because they want university credit, they're not going to get that type of experience through a mobile app, jumping in 30 minutes a day and getting a 700-day streak. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
need direction and more leading. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
difference. It's not the language space shrinking. It's actually growing.
Yeah.
It's just everybody's finding their buckets a little
Mm-hmm.
sooner, and now we actually have an ecosystem. So that's the amazing part.
Interesting. So on the business growth side of
Yeah.
things, is the challenge then, or doesn't have to be, obviously there, every business has like challenges and then you fix them and then there's new challenges that
Yeah.
appear. Obviously it's always going to be changing, but for you guys in the way that you are operating, it's a very different model than most. Is it just people finding out about who you are? Is it just finding the right person? Is it the traffic that comes in? Is it just distinguishing yourself from all these people? Like, what are some of the things that you're like, I wish we could just tweak a knob and then just that thing would get fit solved and it'll be okay, right?
Yeah. I wish it was as easy as an on-off switch. That's for sure.
Yeah,
But I guess that's
me
my
too.
job, is to figure that what those levers are.
Uh-huh.
Here's the hardest part, Joel, is finding the motivations. Okay. No matter what we're doing, this is not just learning a second language, but life in general. When we want to do
Mm-hmm.
something new or something that's difficult, we want to go from point A to point B. It's this in between. And it's how uncomfortable are we willing to get from point A to point B, right?
Mm.
It's, we're finishing up January. It's resolution season for a reason, right? So everybody wants to have a healthy body. But no, not everybody wants to go to the gym and work really hard, lifting weights and
Yeah.
doing cardio. Not everybody wants to eat healthy enough where they have a good body, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. So when you get through this certain level of comfort, is what is your why for doing it? And language is
Mm-hmm.
no different. Nobody wants to learn how to speak a second language. Nobody wants to learn how to speak Spanish. It's difficult and uncomfortable. Everybody
Mm.
wants to know a second language. So this is the biggest challenge as a business in the business of learning, is how do we find people who have the motivation that's
Mm.
enough that they'll be able to get through that level of uncomfort so that we can help them. Again, everybody's
Mm.
finding their buckets. Some people,
Yeah.
they do not want to move beyond the comfort of dialing on
I
their
see.
phone and having their phone give them feedback. Some people are willing to get uncomfortable enough to jump online with a
Mm-hmm.
private tutor. And some are even more willing to get uncomfortable to jump into a 5-day challenge with me and my team and in front of a group of 30 or 40 people and practice their Spanish through either a language exchange or on our challenge, they're that willing to get uncomfortable that they want to learn
Hmm.
Spanish because of their why. And that's the biggest thing, is finding out what the motivation and the why is for somebody who wants to learn a second language.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And what's something that I was obviously having these built up questions to really understand what's going on, but something that's really curious to me is the hiring part of the business, because a lot of it is international, and it is, I'm assuming it is international. I
It
actually
is,
have
yeah.
no idea, but I would assume it
Yeah.
is international. And people from, obviously you mentioned Spanish as the main language, but I know that there are other ones as well. So how does that process of hiring usually work? You mentioned that obviously they have the qualifications to become those second language teachers. So it's not just get someone from another country and hire them, but how does that process usually work? And what are some of the things you look for when finding the right people to run that part of the business? And in addition, I'll just add another question in there as well. And looking for someone to operationalize and take care of all that. How does that dynamic work?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to give credit to our academic director and our client service team. Most of these systems were built out. I've been with Live Lingua 2.5 years. A lot of the operation side was built out. But here's the key to finding great teachers and tutors for their talent. So when somebody is interested in teaching with us, the onboarding steps are, of course, there's a general interview with our academic director,
Of course.
resumes, and the typical requirements. But when we decide, before we decide to make an offer, one
Mm.
of our full-time teachers or full-time contractors, all the teachers are contractors, will actually do a trial class with that individual. So if I'm a teacher
Mm.
and I teach French and I want to work with Live Lingua teaching French, we will actually have a French teacher do a trial class with that individual just to get a
Mm.
flavor of what their teaching style is and how they approach the class, what their pedagogy
Hmm.
is if they're not following ours.
Hmm. It's hands on right away.
It is like, hey, let's experience how you teach.
Yeah.
And once they get to that point, we've decided that we would love for them to teach our students French, or we would love for them to teach our students Spanish. They start with us on a 3-month period.
Hmm.
They start by delivering some free trial classes to students who are interested in joining us as clients. But then
Hmm.
we also put these teachers for our Spanish program, they teach group classes first. So we have all the
Mm.
materials. They don't have to worry about what the content is. They don't have to worry about the delivery. It's all set up. So they will teach
Mm.
group classes first as part of the program. Once they've proven themselves in group classes, then we give them a roster of private classes. So now, great, you've proven yourself.
Mm.
You've learned how our software works, our pedagogy, using the materials. Now we can
Hmm.
put them one-on-one with a roster of their private students,
Mm.
because it's so important that they get a taste of the culture, what it's like to
Yeah.
work with Live Lingua, because when we put them on with a private one-on-one students, they're generally that student's teacher for the bulk of that student's journey. Because when
Mm.
we're looking at hiring, as I mentioned, we're looking at education, experience. At that point, we're also testing for culture and fit.
Yeah.
So they're going to be that teacher for that student for pretty much that student's language journey, unless there's
Hmm.
something goes wrong. That could be next
Sure.
4, 5, 6 years. We have
Yeah.
students who have been with their teachers for 8 years, and they religiously take classes. So this is not a hey, let's jump in and teach a couple classes and move around. This is,
Hmm.
I don't know, I can say it's a marriage. That's a little bit steep, but it is a commitment, right? So we need to make sure, one,
Yeah.
that our teachers are committed to the process as well as the
Uh-huh.
students. So the
Yeah. So
match,
it's like a phase one and a phase two in a way.
exactly.
Interesting.
You
Yeah.
betcha. So
Interesting. And why do some, and this is out of curiosity
hmm.
now, why do some students decide to stay for such a long time? Maybe they have already learned the language. Why do they still decide to maintain that relationship with the teachers that they've had while they were still beginning the learning
Yeah.
process?
Well, a lot of ways they become friends,
Mm.
right? Like when you go through an experience of learning a second language, which I know you've done and I have done, and you have that person on the other side who you are confiding in. Like, we get
Yeah.
out of our comfort zone to learn a second language.
Hmm.
It's difficult to do that with strangers. So when we're
True.
evaluating a teacher to bring them on, we're also taking a look at is, great, how quick are you able to build a relationship with
Mm.
a student? And can that be locked in for life? So a lot of our students, certainly most of our long-term students, become friends with their tutors. Sometimes they go
Mm.
on vacation together, they go on visit, right? We've got students who have literally flown to Buenos Aires on vacation just so they could meet with their tutor, right? They just chose,
That's really
I'm
cool.
going to go to Buenos Aires for vacation. I have to take vacation anyway. Might as well go to BA and meet my tutor and have lunch,
Hmm.
right? That's so rare these days. So you mentioned the operative word, it is relationship, right? So they
Mm.
stay with us for a long time because it also does become quite social. The second piece I would add is, from a practical point, is for those of us who are learning Spanish or another language, but that's not commonly spoken where we live. Like I'm in Calgary,
Hmm.
Alberta. I don't know a lot of Spanish speaking people. Where else
Yeah.
am I going to get practice? Right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I could join some Spanish clubs and all that,
Yeah.
but the best place
If
for
you're
me to
not
get
constantly doing
practice
it.
is
Hmm.
with my tutors. So in a lot of cases, it's just hey, here's a topic. My tutor's going to ask me some questions, and now we have a conversation where I can literally practice for an hour. I don't have to leave my house and I have to meet new people, but I can still get the practice, especially right people like us. And yeah,
Hmm.
I would say most people around the world, we're super busy and to
Yeah.
travel to be places, but it's the immersion experience. So we have
Mm.
most of our students stay with us because they have a great relationship with their tutor, and it's also a safe place for them to continue practicing the skill that they've been building.
That's really, really interesting. And just a quick question, and I'll cut this part off. Do you have a hard stop at the half hour mark?
No, we're good.
Okay, awesome. Just wanted to check in. We
Yeah,
won't be too much longer, but
yeah,
I
no
just wanted
problem.
to be respectful of your time. And when it comes to some lessons along the way, I know that building a company and helping grow a company is oftentimes, as I don't remember exactly who said this, but it's like chewing glass, and eventually you'll just start enjoying the taste of blood. What are some of the lessons, maybe one or two, from helping grow Live Lingua that are always just stuck in the back of your mind?
From the business aspect of it is,
Yeah.
the stuff that keeps me up at night is that we turn a great client into an enemy. That's what keeps me up at night. There's always going to be
Mm.
things that happen. I mean, at the end of the day, economies do what they do. I don't control that, right? Business is what it is. We have to attract new clients. We also have to keep clients.
Hmm.
My philosophy, and I'm a marketer by trade, is it costs 10 times as much resources to acquire a new client as it does to keep somebody happy.
Hmm.
So if marketing and sales are going to do all of this work to attract a new student, we better impress them and keep them for
Hmm.
life. And the things that keep me up at night is these loyal students that take classes every week with their tutors. And right, there's no question about the hours they're paying for, and that happens religiously. It's keeping them not just satisfied,
Hmm.
but fulfilled, right? A
Mm.
satisfied client will always look generally at your competitors and different options, but a
Yeah.
fulfilled client will never leave. And
Mm.
that's the thing that keeps me up at night because if we have to grow our business exclusively through acquiring new students, then we will spend all of our days and all of our nights just trying to replace students we lost. And this is not a lesson
Yeah.
I learned in Live Lingua, by the way. This is a
Sure.
lesson I learned from a different business that I had run, and it was in professional services. We ran a boutique marketing agency, and
Hmm.
that's kind of what made me jump out of that industry. Is it was very difficult and tiring and everything about it. Just working to replace clients you're going to lose inevitably. And I
Hmm.
vowed when I left that business, I said I will not work in a business that requires that. And if I do get into a business, I'm going to ensure that our primary motivation is keeping the people that continue to be loyal to us and jump in as fulfilled as possible. So that's probably my biggest
Hmm.
lesson in business in general, but has
Yeah.
become very apparent at Live Lingua because now
Hmm.
they're, like you said, the sea of sameness and all of the different language services out there, whether it's mobile apps, digital courses, private tutors, freelancers, like there's
Hmm.
millions of options. We need to,
Yeah.
right, when we find somebody who is looking for us, that we need to do everything we can that's within
Hmm.
our power to keep them.
Yeah. Doing what you can to go the extra mile, right?
Yeah.
I think that's so key, and oftentimes overlooked. So it's
Yeah.
awesome to see that you guys have that as well.
Yeah.
And I just have two couple questions more, two more questions for you, which I'm asking almost everybody, and I think it's a good way to reframe. sorry, the first one that I'm asking everybody, and then the other one you'll see what it is.
Sure.
This one is a good way to reframe and just kind of think outside the box a little bit. So, if you had a magic wand, Stacy, and you could just wave this wand, and it would just solve one thing in the business that will make hitting your growth goals much easier, what would that one thing be? What would you fix?
The one thing I would fix is knowing exactly who is looking or will be wanting a private tutor services. Because as I mentioned, private tutoring isn't for everybody. They have to be ready to be uncomfortable. But the magic wand is, hey, listen, there is a pool of people around the world who want to learn a second language and are committed to do it, is just knowing where that pool is. Whether they choose us or not, I don't control that. But as a business owner, it's weeding through everybody who's not ready for private tutoring, then wading through everybody who's on the fence about private tutoring, just to find the smaller group of people, which is still quite large, by the way, who are ready, willing, and able to jump into the uncomfortable sea of learning a second language. So that would be my magic wand, is to know exactly who is looking for us and how to reach them.
Awesome. And then my last question here for you is, I'm telling this to everybody. If someone's watching every episode, they'll be like, "Oh, this guy's saying the same thing again." Yes, I am. I stole a bit from Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO podcast. I think it's such an amazing part. So I decided to steal it very humbly from him, which is the last guest left a question for you, and they had no idea who you were. But here's the question. You ready?
Yes.
And then you will leave a question for the next person.
Okay, good. Payback.
So the question is, what is the most recent or the greatest mistake you've ever made in business?
Oh my God. I've made so many mistakes. The beauty is I've had one more win than mistakes I've made, which is what I consider success. The biggest mistake I've made. My biggest mistake is not necessarily money driven. It's the amount of time I've lost by not recognizing when I should have moved on. So as an entrepreneur, my biggest challenge has always been when is something just not working? And then when do we decide it's never going to work? Because entrepreneurs, we know that it's heads down, just go, don't quit, right? Don't give up. Right. One of my favorite authors, she's also a friend of mine and a former client, Shannon Richter, co-wrote 3 Feet from Gold. If you've ever read that book, it's about you don't quit just before you're there. My challenge and my biggest mistake is is distinguishing between when I'm 3 feet from gold or I'm a mile away and it's time to be done. That's been my biggest mistake. And it has cost me years in my entrepreneurial career by not figuring out when to move on to the next thing, the other thing, or to pivot and try something else. But that mistake, it has cost me some money, probably more money than most people will earn in a career. But more importantly, it's cost me years of experience. I've learned. I'm grateful for having to look upon that experience and learn from it.
Yeah.
But it's cost me years in my career.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I'm not sure if it's Phil Knight who said it, like, know when to quit.
Yeah.
But it's not in the sense that like you're quitting and you're leaving, because as you said, as entrepreneurs, we never want to quit. It's like, keep going. And the end goal will always be the same, but it's knowing when to quit or like pivot from the current thing that you are doing. And I think you highlighted that very, very, very well. So Stacy, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being on here. If someone wants to learn a little bit more about Live Lingua, and where should they go?
Best place is a search for our website, livelingua.com. It's LIVELINGUA.com. Or find us on social. It's Live Lingua at everywhere. So Instagram, YouTube, it's 2 great places to find us there too.
Awesome. Stacy, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Joel. My pleasure.